Ajit, welcome to Jam with Sam, and this is the 19th episode of Indian Networker. So, tell us about your journey. I did a lot of trolling, so this shows how the privacy settings on a page should be proper, because they are all open. Even though you're a friend, so a lot of things. I got a lot of things from LinkedIn. You've done a really good, job on your LinkedIn and all that stuff. I couldn't get 2 logos of those companies. Otherwise, I got most of the logos out over there. So, tell us about your journey from working to entrepreneurship and then becoming an angel investor.
Okay, so I can only tell you the second and third part, because until the age of 45, I was never employed, and I'm 45 now. So my first job in my life was in September of 2014, right? So subsequent to my engineering plus MBA, I immediately got entrepreneurial. Did my first stint of entrepreneurship, set a company called Kits, ran it for 6.5 years, which is quite a coincidence because I ran my second company also eventually for 6.5 years, and just a coincidence. Eventually I sold that company. It was purchased by Intel through its VC arm called Intel Capital, where they were trying to acquire education assets and roll it into one company. This was in the year 2000. Subsequently I said, okay, now you know what, the money I had made at that point seemed like a lot of money. Okay, today it's like a joke, obviously, and I thought I'm never going to earn money again. As in now, abhi bas aram karenge. And I was exactly 30 years of age, because this was the year 2000. I'm born in 1970. So over the next 4.5 to 5 years after that, I had 2 kids. I authored my first book. I became a consultant. I traveled a lot. I slept a lot. I gained a lot of weight, which is the only thing that has lasted from then to now. And after that, even that got boring, frankly. Doing whatever the hell you want also is not as exciting when you do it for many years. Okay, sometimes you just want some structure in your life. So I got entrepreneurial again. This time I set up a company called Corpus Callosum Learning. Along with what my earlier company used to do, my non-compete with them was about to get over. This did many more things. Because I was an author, I became a publisher thinking that we can do a better job with authors. Since publication now did not only mean books, I also got into digital publishing, running websites. Actually more than 400 websites at the same time, wow, right? On similar tech platforms, etc. So it was a little scalable, but more than 400 as at my peak time. I got into testing and a couple of other things. This business, though I didn't lose money, it did not go very well. It did not go very well, and the primary reason for the only black mark in it, and that was a suicidal black mark, was that in March of 2008, when we were probably in our like 4th year or so, I raised money, I raised private equity. And the kind of terms I got and the kind of deal I got was like, as in, it was a dream investment. As in, it would probably, if you at that point evaluated it, it would seem like, such unrealistically good investments don't happen. But then shortly thereafter, around the end of 2008, the global economic crisis happened. I was never bothered about those things because I would only choose businesses which are non-cyclical. As in, I don't know that I had a preference towards that. But my investor's business was highly cyclical. Okay. So my investor was about to die because they were a financial investor and the finance sector was hit the worst. So they tried to now, when somebody is dying, they're going to like grab anything they get. So the first thing that they could grab was all the company they had invested in. And they tried to get their money back, which we had already spent. And this started like a 12-month long process where all our energies were consuming with engaging with the investor. And I could see that the company was dying like with every passing month, where all we were doing was this. Also because it died a slow death. I could not sell it at any point of time because always I felt once this gets over, I'll get back and start doing things. Unlike my previous company, where I was actually getting into a merger situation and then one of the parties that I was going to merge into got acquired by Intel, and they suddenly become so much stronger than me that they said, you know, we'll buy you also instead of merging with you. So that was a slightly different situation. Like I said, I didn't lose too much money. I gained a lot of experience. My black hair turned white, right? Here I am. So I got into angel investing, which I had been doing since 1998, but I got into it structurally in a structured fashion in 2010. From 2010 to 2014, I was a full-time angel investor, and there are very few people who are full-time angel investors. In fact, it kind of almost defies the definition of angel investor. I, however, immersed myself fully into it. In September of 2014, which we are now getting to like almost close to today, I joined IIT Bombay. We have a business incubator there called SIGN, which is Society for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. I was shocked to see that a supposed semi-government like organization, and hence a very, I would say, an organization you would expect to be very traditional, actually hired somebody who had never been employed before. Oh. You know, so hiring somebody at the age of 45 who has never been an employee before, I think takes a lot of guts, right? Turning an employee itself takes a lot of guts, but to be an employer of such an employee, I think is crazy. So I give them a lot of credit for that. They've done a lot of good work. I stuck around there for almost exactly 4 months. Last month, early March, I quit that, and I'm now off doing something of my own again, which is taking some time to put together. So I'll be announcing it later.
Okay, so you're still doing angel investing?
I am still doing angel investing.
So average, if you can, you know, give us some ideas, you know, you have angel investor, you have venture or vulture capital, which sometimes they call it over there.
Right.
So what's the difference between all this and how does it apply?
Okay, so by the way, when you say vulture capital, I'm actually not going to deny that. You will be surprised. As in, the problem tends to be that regardless of the chemistry between the investor and the investee, their objectives are not 100% aligned.
Okay.
So that I think is a structural problem. For example, the investor has a shorter tenure than the entrepreneur usually. Furthermore, at some point when the investor is now getting ready to sell, at that time for them to consider squeezing the maximum value, which might have potentially a negative repercussion in the long run, is understandable for their economic interest. So I understand why this term vulture capital comes up. And one more interesting part, especially people who are investing in slightly earlier stages than, let's say, a private equity player who is investing in a company which has a 500 crore turnover or something along those lines. Especially people who are investing in the earlier stages, the risk they are taking is phenomenal, that the business will not even survive. As a consequence, to mitigate that risk, the expectation of rewards is dramatic. Like for instance, if an angel investor in a specific investment multiplies their money tenfold in a 4-year period, it is not impressive. And the reason I say it's unimpressive is not because, you know, they are terribly greedy, but because they have lost their principal on so many others, that once you put it into the same basket, it's not that fabulous a return, right? So as in, not that angel investors are making like a 1000x return kind of thing, but at least I would say if you are invested in it for 5 years, you would look at a 25x kind of return in your successful return. So if you put 1 lakh, it should become 25 lakhs in 5 years, and this only averages out those where your 1 lakhs have become zero, several of those. So this explains why. I'll give you an example of a company where, you know, we actually told the entrepreneur, you know, you have got 2,000 customers. His customers were school students. You got 2,000 customers in last 2 years. Why don't we just do this? Just make your product free, and let's try to get 1 lakh in the next 1 year. Now this logic does not appeal to the entrepreneur often. So this is where I say there might be misalignment, and if there is misalignment and you've given away a lot of your rights, and the investor starts asserting those rights, that is where the organization would suffer, and vulture investment is right. To answer your specific question, I think that if without getting too technical, angel investors are individuals, VCs are institutions. The way VCs, venture capitalists, have evolved in India, the biggest and most important ones of them are subsidiaries of multinational VCs. So to some extent, even the bosses in India don't have complete control, while as an individual, I can do whatever I want. Right? Third thing is that as an angel investor, if I like a company, I can remain invested in it for like 20 years if I like. Okay. As an I'll say, it's growing, so let's remain there. While in a VC, unlike a mutual fund, they take money and that fund has to be returned. Like even by law in India, by SEBI guidelines, if you take money for a fund and let's say you get your return in a particular investment, you can't then take that money and put it in another one like a mutual fund can. So a mutual fund buys 10 stock, then sells State Bank of India stock, it can now take this money and put it into the 11th company. SEBI says in venture capital you have to return the money. As a result, there's a life cycle. So sometimes, often I would say, you know I have got a good investment, but my deadline is coming because of my agreement, so I'll still have to sell it. So these are probably the differences between angel and VC.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so how do you use social media to brand yourself, and which platform do you prefer?
You know, I have sometimes seen that unlike people who are like very active on all platforms, a lot of people are largely one platform. So I was largely Facebook. And when I would occasionally visit Twitter, I would see that the Twitter kind of people think that Facebook people are stupid. As in, I got that impression from the exclusively Twitter kind of people, you know, where you go to Facebook and it seems like everybody is having the best marriage. And you're thinking, as you know, all couples have all these smiling pictures and everybody seems to be traveling all the time because you only get to see that bit, right? So I could not really enjoy Twitter very much, but I must say that now I've started enjoying Twitter a little more and Facebook a little less also because of the way you access each other's content. I don't know, maybe Facebook has become very big, but I do know that if I post something on Facebook, almost none of my friends tell me that they saw it. You know, by the way, I've reached the 5,000 friend mark, and then every month I go back and remove 400 so that I can add some more. So I've reached that churn part. Twitter doesn't have that problem. While in Twitter, what I find is that when I post something, most of my friends seem to read it. So I'm a Facebook person migrating to Twitter.
There's if I can tell you how you can get your friends to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me. Without paying Facebook. Yeah.
Without paying Facebook over there. So basically it's engagement. So when I go through my Facebook page, like if I change my profile photo, so it's with a beautiful actress, I get 200 likes. If it's with somebody else, a boxer, I'll get some 50 likes over there. All depends on that. But I go and engage with, you know, at least 50, 60 people throughout the day. Either like their post, comment their post. So the moment you engage with that person, you see that person will automatically come. It's a kind of you scratch my back, I scratch your back kind of stuff. So you'll find a kind of engagement increasing in that. Second is in the photographs, when you tag a couple of people over there, like if I want to get good engagement in a post, I'll tag my wife in that, or my kid in that. So her friends see it and automatically that thing comes in over. Organic reach is dying on Facebook, but you can still get it if you are engaging with other people more over
so
there.
now we are not going to call it Jam with Sam, it's suddenly turned to Jam with Ajit. I'm going to ask you questions. I think you are giving all the great things, so now this says answers.
Answer over there. Okay.
So now I'm going to get some more social media gyan from you.
That we can take it offline over there. Okay, so something about your family.
One wife, 2 kids. And why that is, you know, not as much of a joke as you think it is that everything I have done in life, as to where I have lived, to what profession I have had, as in I have really been able to sustain interest only for a few years. The only thing I have kind of stuck by is that wife thing. And it's a constant threat that she faces, I guess. 2 kids, 7th standard and 10th standard. And because I have had some academic background, I used to teach while I was still a student at the University of Texas at Austin. So I'm one of those prof dads who goes home and teaches his own kids also.
Okay.
You know, so I'm fairly involved with them. So I know I read his textbooks before he reads his textbooks. I don't know if you can imagine how painful that is to the kid.
Okay, so quick gun Sam.
Okay.
Sequoia.
Yeah, okay, so Indian Sequoia don't like, US Sequoia like. So
okay.
there are 2 different ideas.
Mumbai.
Mary Jaan.
Entrepreneurship.
Divine.
Family.
Foremost.
Money.
Extremely important.
Extremely important.
Sorry, I know I'm kind of giving a different answer.
Narendra Modi.
Scary.
Scary, okay. So, which country has a distinction of fostering entrepreneurship? If there's a country in the world which really fosters entrepreneurs.
Okay, so the short answer, long answer. Short answer is Israel, no doubt about it. However, if I were to be an entrepreneur and, you know, other things such as social factors, children, etc. were not a consideration, I could go anywhere, I would go to Hong Kong.
Hong Kong, okay.
Yeah, because I think I would be able to work that system. A better answer that most people give is Singapore, but I think that Hong Kong has a little more opportunity, a little more vibrancy. I can manage Hong Kong better.
Okay, fantastic. Do you think that being a woman is much tougher to be an entrepreneur in India as a woman?
Okay, since I'm not a woman, malum tha na, as in, did you just mix up the questions? As in, I don't know.
No.
Suddenly,
Specifically, I'm asking you that.
Okay, so there are 2 answers. The answer is no, it's not tougher. And the true answer is it's much, much more tougher. But we try to be politically correct and never say that, especially when we get investment deals and the team is a completely woman founder team or a predominantly woman founder team, etc. So no investor will ever say this is the reason they didn't invest, but it becomes very apparent that the reaction they get is very different. And I must say that if it is a solo founder and if it's a woman, that is really bad. And I have students or people I mentor and they are solo founder as a woman. I don't know, as in it's very disgraceful. That's why I said there are two answers, one which we want to give and the other that the truth is. But I do find that yes, there is at least one additional layer of difficulty that comes in. And I cannot defend it, but that's how it is.
Okay, so we always seen the younger generation, that's Gen X. We have one guy, Sachin, who just got funded over there, Townscript. They get funded more than the existing 40 plus entrepreneurs, a lot of them in the room over here, who have an existing profit making business. Right. So what is the problem where they are not able to scale up, or what is the problem where they are not able to get funding? A lot of funding is, okay, go to the bank, give collateral, that kind of stuff and all. So what is the kind of problem? Why, as an angel investor, why are you not investing in those companies which are already profit making?
Sure. So first let me preface that question a little, because this is an extremely important question for every audience. When you hear about Flipkart raised $1 billion, okay, it has raised like about 3 billion or close to that. But in one shot, it had raised $1 billion, being the world's first company to do that. And then so much more, and you go out and you see all these housing.com hoardings and stuff. Our first reaction as outsiders tends to be that this is crazy, this is a bubble, it's going to burst. Right? In all your wisdom, you may be right. I personally don't see it as a bubble. I see that there's a lot of irrationality out there, crazy stuff happening, which I'm not going to defend. But a lot of strong forces also initially look crazy. For instance, I was just talking to you, I believe, about coaching class, and since you do that video thing, when this Mahesh tutorials had come up, all the other coaching classes said, "Ye nahi chalega." And they kept doing their crazy stuff, and now they became so big that everybody feels now it is too late to be like them. Now I'll answer your question more precisely. Since I had the Gokul ice cream guy, I must give you an example which I know more, which is natural ice cream, which is also not this 24-year-old kid starting an ice cream parlor, right? So I know several private equity players, including a friend of mine, Bharat Banka, who heads Aditya Birla Private Equity, who says we have worked very hard to try to invest into natural, okay, and he doesn't take our investment. So to that extent, I must say that different categories of investors have different expectations. Angels / VCs. I'll just give you an example. The amount of money they invest together or individually could be as less as 30-40 lakhs, as much as up to 5 crores. Okay, this is the very early stage. Angels themselves can invest like a $50 million eventually. But regardless of how much they invest, the expectation is that for a short period after that, short period I would define as 12 to 18 months. For a short period after that, the growth graph has to turn vertical. Okay, that means, and I'll give you, when more and more people are now becoming investors, people who probably in a senior generation have made some money and are now saying, our business is not growing so fast, so they become investors, they ask me for advice as to what should I expect. I say very simply, in the first 3 rounds of investment, first round being 25 lakhs, next round being 2 crores, and still next round being 15 crores, just as sample numbers. In every one of those investments, the underlying metric, let's say the underlying metric is revenues. There could be many other metrics, by the way. It could be users, it could be transactions. Let's call it revenues. The underlying metric in every one of those rounds of investments, even the first one where it was probably only 25 lakhs, has to grow 10x in a period of under 12 months. Now, when you say established businesses, the word established is a positive adjective. That means it sounds like, oh, solid business. I have often found that some of these established businesses, if you told them that they have to become 10x in a 6 to 12 month period, then take some more money and again become 10x of that. So 3 rounds of 10x actually 1000x, right? So some of these digital businesses, etc., have the possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there have been cases where it has happened, where a business in a period under 3 years, because each one is at the most 3 years, have grown 1000x. Some of the businesses that you are calling established probably don't have that possibility.
Okay.
Right? Of course, I'm proven wrong again and again. For example, take the case of a physical coffee shop. Barista, Starbucks, blah, blah. Now, since it involves setting up a shop, hiring employees, moving goods, one would think that you can't grow 1000x in a 3-4 year period, but there have been examples around the world where that has happened. Starbucks being an example. I don't want to give only the greatly successful example. However, the kind of businesses that you are defining, as long as they are not 100% dependent on the owner, which means you remove the owner, the business collapse. As long as they are not 100% dependent on the owner, I think private equity players are definitely on the lookout for them. The expectation of returns that private equity players have is quite low, such as doubling in 3 years or a 24% rate of annualized rate of return as an investor, not as a lender. And I think that these businesses potentially could do that. Just a word of caution, even in a conservative society like India, and now I'm talking of conservative as from business practices, not from cultural practices, even in a conservative society like India, more than half the companies, the real number is around 53% based on a limited sample size, more than half the companies into which private equity players have invested within the first 3 years have removed the owner, the actual founder, and have taken over the management. Right? So this also is one of the reasons that a lot of entrepreneurs themselves, Natural Ice Cream being an example, would probably not even consider this.
Fantastic. So do you feel the bubble is going to burst?
I think there is a lot of irrationality, exuberance and craziness, but it is not a bubble according to me. It is like, when you think about what is right with India and what is wrong with India, we can name like, in every democracy, people complain a lot about their country, even in Singapore. So we can name a lot of things that are wrong with India, but if you become objective and really take a 20-year view, we have really come a long way compared to where we were. I think likewise, there are a lot of craziness in the startup space, but no, I don't see the craziness level to be at the point where it's a bubble, where it'll all just someday change and all of these Flipkarts will suddenly go away or become very small or operate in a dramatically different way. I don't see it as a bubble. I do see some cleanup as required. But it's growing so fast that people are not bothering about those niceties at this point.
So you think there's a transition going to happen, like you have a store like Chroma, eZone, all these stores are there, and then you have a Flipkart and all. So as the digital penetration improves, your mobile and all that improves, you think these stores are going to get phased out and people are only going to buy online?
Very good question. I was asked this question by Economic Times just yesterday. Here's the thing. So there is this real world people who run their retail store, who run their restaurant, who run their coaching class, who run their beauty parlor. They have expertise sometimes lasting more than a generation, and they are pretty good at what they do. They work on healthy profit margins being defined as 15 to 40%. Real world companies. Then comes a digital version of that. So there is a Future Group, which is Big Bazaar and all of that, and then there is a Flipkart who seems to be working on a negative margin. There is all these famous restaurants, and then there's a Box 8 which you can't even go to because it's such a shabby place, and they 100% depend on delivery. You have these beauty parlors which are like 5-star like, then there is Belita who sends a Maruti van to your house and does the work at your home. What tends to happen in 100% of the cases in all countries is that first the established players say, this is not how the business is done. Right? So they overlook them and they see that a lot of these new guys come and die. So they are like, see, I was right. They don't know their kids. They're just out of college. But what also happens is some of these guys, because their business models might actually be scalable, become very big. It has happened again and again. Why all over the world are the biggest retailers, not the biggest online retailers, like for example, Walmart is supposed to have this fabulous supply chain, right? Go back to as recently as 5 years ago, Walmart.com was not doing very well at all. While they should have been the strongest, why would Amazon come up? The reason is that the transition from adapting to a new technology is very tough. I have sat with the Bianis and they recognized this a few years ago. So they said we have a strong physical footprint, we want a strong digital footprint. They hired McKinsey consultants to help them make the transition, and they hired McKinsey from New York City. While there's a McKinsey right here, because they said we've got to be the biggest. So they set up futurebazaar.com, etc. But there are issues. There is a different business model, and I appreciate the likes of Staples.com and Walmart.com. Unfortunately, I can't give you a single Indian example where despite being a long-standing physical store, they also have become strong players here. But I do believe that businesses which can be done online as well as offline, the online does present certain advantages, and that is very scary for offline people.
I think the main thing is real estate. Real estate costs are huge.
Let us say everything related to logistics and physical stuff. It could be real estate, it could be upkeep of that real estate. Like for instance, if you go to a restaurant, the ambience determines the price you pay for it, right? Yeah. As in the same dish with the same taste, you pay 400 rupees also and 40 rupees also, the same coffee, etc., right? While if you are getting home delivery, what is the ambience? The cardboard box? So the logistics, capital cost versus operational expense, blah blah, all of that is different.
Where are angel investors and investors looking at? Are they looking only at internet or apps, or they're looking at something different also?
What is very interesting is that all of these capital investors, such as venture capitalists, angel investors, etc., are blamed of only being investing in search, social, local, mobile, apps, website, e-commerce, etc. I'll tell you very simply, we are not necessarily that intelligent. As in, we very basic needs such as making money, right? So if my money can come from, you know, grooming pet dogs, I would invest in a company that grooms pet dogs.
Okay.
However, you know, this is the hypocrisy inbuilt in all systems. Like I said, the mortality rate of these businesses is so high that the ones that you win in need to be able to grow like a few 100x in the next couple of years. Businesses that have a lot of physical and operational component find that very challenging, though there are exceptions, including ones that I have invested in. As a result, our tendency always goes to the two digital oriented businesses. Now, digital could mean anything. It could mean digital education, which I'm not a very big fan of. It could be social, it could be e-commerce, it could be a bunch of those. But I still feel that by natural selection, if I say, I don't care which industry, here are my 7 criteria. The fact is that usually only digital companies meet those criteria.
Fantastic. So we end with a word of advice to all the young entrepreneurs over here.
Yeah, those of you who think you meet that criteria, please raise your hand so I know who I am talking to. किसी ने हाथ नहीं उठाया, friend.
They're all scared, you know, like you'll not invest in them.
Yeah, so yeah.
See, one guy is there.
No, it's too late. Chance pe dance. When I ask the question, not right now. Okay, so here's the thing. Advice comes very easy because it's free, you give it away, you don't bear the risk of that being valuable to you at all. So with all those disclaimers, I think that everything around us, the environment is accelerating faster and faster, and this probably is true for the last few generations. As in, our parents thought that our life was faster, my kids are doing things at a much younger age, etc. Just be open-minded and don't keep, as in it's great to sit and think of the good old days, and there were good old days where we used to watch Chhaya Geet and the movie on every Sunday in Doordarshan and all. So those we look back, we used to hate it then, right? So it's nice to sit and reminisce, but I also feel that the opportunities and that are coming up, like for example, the earlier speaker Anshu talked about, you know, how she probably did backpacking 10 years ago. I don't think she would have, her mom would probably have been able to do it when she was that age, right? So when you are open to such opportunities, you really discover a huge wealth out there, right? It could be travel, it could be investment, it could be new way of looking at business. And just some of these things are pretty crazy, and I think that all it takes is for us to be a little more open-minded as opposed to, you know, just resist every change that comes our way. I think that people like me actually do the opposite and just embrace change and then regret it to some extent. But I still think that we should be open. There's like just a lot of great stuff happening out there. India is moving very, very fast, right? Let us all move along with it.
Fantastic, Ajit.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I know. Hey, now both your cameras are there. I can't even give that profile view that you wanted.
You'll get lots of profile views.
Right, thank you.
You'll be massively tagged tomorrow on Facebook.
Thank you.